Hi, this is Don. I think we've all come across videos and articles and the like that promise us the secrets to success in a relationship, in finance, a career, etc., inner peace. And while they often can be insightful and uplifting a bit, I rarely find that they dramatically change my life. And often they're not secrets. I've heard them before in one form or another. So I'm going to make a somewhat bold claim and say that I'm going to share something with you, some ideas that can dramatically change your life. And I'm speaking from experience because they dramatically changed mine. And they have to do with the ability to make and keep commitments. The ability to make and keep commitments. This is a powerful form of individual power, in a sense, that if you can make a commitment and stick to it, that can have a dramatic effect on your life. Unfortunately, many people really struggle with that form of personal power, and making commitments and keeping them can be difficult. Now, probably the best teacher I ever had, a man by the name of Al Altshuler, had one component to all of his classes, and that is, in addition to the content, he always had an area of personal growth. And one of his classes, the issue of commitment, was his area of personal growth. And he had a theory, what he called the crisis of commitment, that he had us work through so that we could become more effective at both making and keeping commitments, which he thought could make a big difference in life. Now, had you asked me prior to that class whether I had a problem with commitment, I would have said, no, not a problem for me. Turns out it was a big problem. I just wasn't aware of it. So I'm going to go over these four, what are called the crises of commitment, with you briefly, and think about them as I go through them. Do any of them apply to you, or perhaps to someone you know? Because the good news is, if you find an area that you're stuck on, you're not stuck forever. If you're willing to think about it and work on it, you can make a breakthrough. And as I said, that happened to me, and my life dramatically shifted. So the first crisis is the crisis of choice. The crisis of choice. Some people have difficulty making commitments because they can't decide. Do I stay in my current job, or do I look for another job? Do I remain in the job or go back for additional training? Do I stay in a relationship that I'm not quite happy with, but I'm comfortable? And if I leave it, I could be alone, and will I find anybody else? And we can go back and forth, just not making a choice. I've had friends who for years were struggling with a particular decision, and every time I spoke with them, it was this: they were back and forth. They just could not decide. You've heard the expression, not to decide is to decide. You are in a sense making a choice by remaining static. Now, I had an experience years ago where I was in a job that I wasn't so sure about, and I was thinking of leaving and getting some additional training. I was working in an educational field, and I was going back and forth, could not decide. It was really frustrating. And one day my boss dropped in my office, and he was probably one of the wisest people I've ever known. And when he gave you advice, it was not direct. What he would do is tell you a story, a parable of some sort. And then it was your job to extract the meaning, and it turned out typically to be a pretty powerful message. He had previously been a minister, and so he often drew his stories from that background. So one day he pops his head in my office. I had no clue that he was aware of what I was struggling with. And he says to me, "Don, indecision is demonic. Indecision is demonic." And he said, imagine, just for the sake of example, that the devil is real, that there's a devil, and it's his job to interfere with your life, to defeat you. If you can't decide, if you're going back and forth constantly, you're doing his work. You're not getting anywhere. You're making yourself miserable. He said, once you make a decision and you start to act on it, then the devil has to work to defeat you. Indecision is demonic. And then he walked out of the office. And I was kind of stunned for a second. I thought, what in heaven's name is he talking about? then I thought about it and I realized precisely what he was talking about. And he was right. I needed to make a decision, and I did. Ended up going back to school, worked out really well. There's another aspect to this decision making, and because probably all of us have our own ways of making decisions, right? Some of us probably do research before we decide anything. Some of us list the pros and cons. Some people say, I go with my gut. One of the people to write, I think, most thoughtfully about decision making is a psychologist, Ellen Langer. She's written a couple books, at least, on mindfulness. In her most recent book, The Mindful Body, she talks about decision-making and risk-taking. And she makes, I think, a really interesting and important point. It's not about making the right decision, but it's about making whatever decision you choose the right decision. That is, both choices might end up working out real well or real poorly. It's what you do once you've made that decision. So the important thing is, whatever your method for decision-making is, make the decision and then focus on making it right. So that's challenge number one. And in most cases, actually, I don't have problems making decisions. I've made a lot of shifts, choices. I've moved different places, different relationships, different jobs. In general, I haven't had a problem making decisions. Turns out, however, that my problem arrived in the second crisis, which is the crisis of commitment. The crisis of commitment. It's one thing to make a choice, it's quite another to commit to that choice. And what I found I was doing is I had no problem making choices, but I was looking for the perfect solution, the perfect job, perfect career, perfect relationship, perfect environment to live in. And of course, in life, nothing is perfect. And so I kept putting off really committing and investing myself. And I had to work on that. So once I realized that, I thought, I need to work on that. Even though I was at school for a limited period of time, I want to invest in what I'm doing now and in the people that are in my life. And that was the beginning of a real change for me. Now, if you're fortunate and you can make choices and you can commit to them, you're not out of the woods yet, because there's a third crisis, the crisis of confidence. The crisis of confidence. Some people, inevitably with any challenging commitment, whether we're trying to lose weight or exercise or, make a relationship work or a job or whatever, we run through some tough times. And some people, as soon as things get difficult, they start to lose confidence and say, I'll never be able to do this, and they give up. If you look at most of the successful people in the world, you'll find out that success did not come instantly. They often have a lot of failure in their background. Actors may have gotten rejected for a lot of roles. Famous authors may have had their manuscripts rejected. Musicians may have spent years, trying to get a hit or be successful before they finally broke through. So the key is, can you get through those difficult times where you're starting to question yourself and hang in there? That's an important part of fulfilling that commitment. Well, if you can get through those three, you're doing great, but for some people, there's another important challenge, and that's the crisis of meaning, the crisis of meaning. You may have initially undertaken a goal or a commitment because it meant something to you. There was a payoff at the end. Perhaps you had a certain career goal and you enter school. But what if that career goal changes? You no longer are interested in that profession. What are you supposed to do at that point? So sometimes the original motivation behind our commitment is no longer there. So do we lose all the effort that we put in? Well, no, you don't have to. Sometimes it's a matter of finding a new meaning. Maybe you can apply the experience in a new way. Or maybe the experience itself has been worthwhile as it is. So those are the four crises of commitment. I wish you luck, and if you find yourself sometimes having difficulty with making and keeping commitments, and hopefully some of these ideas can be helpful to you or perhaps someone you know. So best of luck with your New Year's resolutions and the other little and major commitments that you want to make in life. I should say 2 years after this class, I got married, I had a child, bought a home, and the job I was in, I remained in for 25 years until I retired. And I don't think any of that would have happened without me really working through my issues with commitment. So good luck to you as well. Take care.